November 30th, 1938. In Prague's Rudolfinum, then the seat of the Czechoslovak parliament, a new president is being elected. It is a time out of joint. Just weeks earlier, the country had lost its borderlands through the Munich Agreement. President Edvard Beneš had resigned and flown into British exile, and the political leadership at home now faced the question of who would lead this humiliated, truncated state. Incredibly, the vote falls to a man who never sought the honor and spends his final hours praying he won't be chosen. Emil Hácha, up to that point president of the Supreme Administrative Court, receives an overwhelming majority of votes. After all, the parties had agreed on him in advance. He has no choice but to lament, "I am 66 years old and was preparing for retirement. Instead, I am to be president in such difficult times. It is a great sacrifice, but I will make it, if necessary, for the good of the nation and the state." At that moment, Emil Hácha has no way of knowing just how great that sacrifice will be. He doesn't yet realize that he has only a few years left to live, and that those years will resemble one long, unrelenting nightmare. Emil Hácha was born in 1872 in Trové Sviny, South Bohemia, into a devoutly religious family. His father was a tax official. He graduated from a grammar school in České Budějovice and went on to study law at Charles University in Prague, eventually becoming a legal expert specializing in administrative law. As a student and later as a lawyer, he proved to be brilliant. But Hácha was also a true Renaissance man. He loved sports, especially swimming and mountain hiking, collected art, and spoke 5 world languages, which he used for translating books. Together with his brother, for example, he translated the famous novel 3 Men in a Boat. He also wrote poetry, and not bad poetry at that, especially after falling in love with his cousin Marie Klausova in his early 30s. He married her in 1902, and a year later, their only child, a daughter named Milada, was born. His family life was deeply harmonious, and he truly loved his wife. His professional path was equally straightforward. Under Austria-Hungary, he served in Vienna as a senior advisor to the Imperial Administrative Court. After the establishment of independent Czechoslovakia in 1918, he helped found the new state's equivalent institution, the Supreme Administrative Court. In 1925, at the age of 53, he became its president, which was expected to be the pinnacle and natural conclusion of his legal career. So when that cursed year of 1938 arrived and he was 66 years old, Hácha was genuinely looking forward to a peaceful retirement. But that peace, sadly, would never come. The first blow comes in February 1938, when Hácha's beloved wife Marie dies from complications related to her thyroid. Her loss devastates him completely. Then there's trouble with his daughter Milada, married to Hácha's colleague from the court, Zdeněk Radl. Their marriage is falling apart, allegedly due to Milada's infertility. And in September, a final crushing burden is added. Hitler's aggressive expansionist policies culminate in the Munich Agreement and the occupation of the Czech border regions. On October 5th, President Edvard Beneš resigns. Then, on October 22nd, he boards a plane and departs for exile in Britain. Now the Czech political elite are left to figure out how to deal with the chaos in the newly truncated state, now known as the Second Republic. So a new president must be found. Given the political divisions in the country, the idea of multiple candidates is out of the question. The choice must be someone acceptable to all sides, someone uncontroversial, a purely symbolic figurehead. Names like banker Jaroslav Preiss, industrialist Jan Baťa, and historian Josef Schuster are floated. But in the end, the choice settles on Emil Hácha. After all, he successfully led a major state institution, he has the right age and professional stature, he's always been politically independent, and he speaks excellent German, which may prove essential in the months ahead. The only thing left is for Hácha to accept the candidacy. When Hácha receives the news, he is in shock. He never sought political office, is reeling from personal tragedy, and his health is already beginning to fail, something he supports with a medical report. But the politicians insist. If he refuses, they won't be able to agree on anyone else. and a country already engulfed in chaos will collapse completely. What likely plays a decisive role is not only his deep sense of duty to help the state in a moment of crisis, but also his faith in God. Perhaps he saw the presidency as a burden he must carry, like a cross, as a good Christian. And so, on November 30th, 1938, Emil Hácha is elected the third president of the Czechoslovak Republic.
Slibuji na svou čest a svědomí, že budu dbáti blaha republiky i lidu a šetřiti ústavních a jiných zákonů.
Republice a prezidentovi sláva!
Taking the helm of the country is no easy task. It is facing a refugee crisis from the annexed borderlands, the loss of industrial infrastructure, and a society increasingly influenced by fascist tendencies. The most serious threat, however, lies in Slovakia. Hácha travels there for his first official visit, and for a public that barely knows him, he reveals two sides: his typically gruff demeanor and a more human face, seen when he's cheerfully hiking in the mountains, enjoying drinks and puffing on cigars. But behind the scenes, tensions are running high. The dominant Slovak party, the People's Party, is openly demanding independence, and they're getting strong encouragement from Adolf Hitler. Because Hitler, having taken the Sudetenland, is far from done. His next goal is the total dismantling of Czechoslovakia. The moment comes on March 14th, 1939. That morning, Hungary invades Carpathian Ruthenia, the easternmost part of Czechoslovakia. Just after noon, Slovakia declares independence and immediately becomes a client state of Nazi Germany. And in the afternoon, President Hácha receives an invitation to meet with Hitler in Berlin. When he arrives at the train station at 10 p.m., accompanied by his daughter Milada, he still seems to believe, perhaps naively, that the discussion will center around the Slovak crisis. But he is mistaken. Hitler makes Hácha wait until 1:15 a.m. When he finally appears, the Führer lays it out bluntly. At 6 a.m., German troops will occupy the remainder of Czech territory, and any resistance will be crushed with overwhelming force. But that's not all. Hitler demands that Hácha sign a declaration framing the occupation not as an act of aggression, but as a mutual agreement. In fact, the document states that the president places the fate of the Czech nation into the hands of the Führer. Hácha refuses. Hitler erupts in fury. Under extreme pressure, the elderly president suffers a heart attack and collapses. The Germans panic. He must not die here. Hitler's personal physician, Dr. Morell, gives him a stimulant injection. Hácha regains consciousness and, astonishingly, again refuses to sign. But then Hermann Göring takes him aside and delivers a chilling threat. The Luftwaffe is ready to level Prague to the ground. It is only then that Emil Hácha breaks. He finally agrees, and his signature is added to the paper. When morning breaks, Emil Hácha must drink the bitter cup to the very bottom. The Nazis deliberately delay his return train to Prague so that Hitler can arrive before him and, in a symbolic gesture, be the one to welcome the Czech president at Prague Castle. The state of Czechoslovakia is no more. The new name for the occupied territory will be the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia, and Hácha will henceforth hold the title of Protectorate President. He will also bear the crushing burden of having been the man who allowed it to happen. As he would later say, "For what I have done, the nation will call me a traitor." During the first 2 years of the occupation, Hácha is surprisingly active in defending the Czech people. He stays in contact with Beneš in exile and humbly assures him that he's merely keeping the presidential seat warm until his return. He maintains ties with the resistance, especially with Protectorate Prime Minister Alois Eliáš, who is active resistance member. In November 1939, Hácha protests the closure of Czech universities and the arrest of hundreds of students. A defining trait of his approach is his complete disregard for his public image. When petitioning the Nazis to release students, he does not hesitate to offer concessions in return. For instance, he writes a highly submissive birthday letter to Hitler. In public, he performs the Nazi salute whenever expected, though always in his own half-hearted style. But the strategy works. Over time, he succeeds in having nearly all the imprisoned students released from German concentration camps. Unfortunately, the Czech public has no way of knowing this, and Hácha's reputation quickly plummets. This decline is encapsulated in a satirical song by Voskovec and Heydrich, recorded in American exile.
Hácha, dědeček Hácha, očička má krhavý a ručičky krvavý, Hitleru brácha, v krvi se máchá, náš drahý Emile, ty skončíš nemile.
The situation deteriorates drastically in September 1941, when Reich protector Reinhard Heydrich arrives in Prague with a clear mission: to crush the growing Czech resistance. Just one day after his arrival, he declares martial law. Executions and arrests begin immediately. Even Prime Minister Eliáš, Hácha's close ally, is not spared. The president is devastated and offers his resignation. The government, however, refuses to accept it. They are unwilling to deal with the question of succession. Desperate, Hácha continues in office, watching helplessly as pleas and diplomatic gestures no longer yield any results. Despite his repeated protests, Eliáš and many others are executed, a loss that shakes Hácha to the core. The crisis reaches its peak in May 1942 after the successful assassination of Reinhard Heydrich by Czechoslovak paratroopers. In response, the Nazi regime unleashes a wave of terror. Daily mass executions, the complete destruction of the villages Lidice and Ležáky, and ruthless pressure on Czech institutions. The onslaught breaks Hácha physically and mentally. He stops resisting and begins parroting the propaganda handed to him by the Germans. In early July, he is forced to lead a huge demonstration on Prague's Wenceslas Square, where he publicly denounces Edvard Beneš and the Czechoslovak government in exile.
Jestliže dnes prohlásím lži prezidenta Beneše jako veřejného nepřítele českého národa číslo 1, zjišťuji jen skutečnost. Kdyby nebylo štvání pana Beneše, jeho lidí v cizině a jeho tajných přisluhovačů v našich zemích, naše vlast by byla nejpožehnanější a nejklidnější končinou v Evropě.
His speeches are now written by Emanuel Moravec, the most notorious Czech collaborator. Listening to them is painful, not just because of the words the old man is forced to read, but because of the visible state he is in while reading them.
S trvalým svědomím požadovat, abyste zůstali i nadále za všech okolností všichni věrní vedení a tím říši, jejíž vítězství zajisté vám i vašim dětem zajistí šťastnou budoucnost.
Historians would later debate why Hácha didn't simply step down. What is certain is that he repeatedly considered suicide and even begged his doctors for poison. But in the end, he didn't take his life, likely due not only to his Christian beliefs, but also out of fear that someone like Moravec might take his place and his loyal aides could end up in a concentration camp. And so Emil Hácha endures his fate to the bitter end. That end comes in 1945. By then he is in an advanced stage of arteriosclerosis. He suffers from memory loss, doesn't recognize people, is unable to walk, and sometimes cannot even speak. He remains confined to the presidential retreat in Lani, cared for by his daughter Milada. It's possible he isn't even aware of the country's liberation, nor the order issued just 5 days after the war end by the new communist interior minister Václav Nosek, an order to arrest the gravely ill Hácha and charge him with collaboration. He is taken to the prison hospital in Prague, where, according to reports, guards humiliate him, deny him food, and even urinate on him. The only one who could save him is President Beneš, now returned from exile. But Beneš does nothing. He hasn't forgotten, and he won't lift a finger for him. For the 72-year-old, death may have been a kind of mercy. On June 27, 1945, Emil Hácha dies in the prison hospital without ever facing trial. And so today we have the story of Emil Hácha, a story framed by high politics, a story where the greatest players of the time appear, but essentially a rather ordinary story. The story of a decent man who in a mad time tried to do what he could, only to catch it from both sides in the end. First from the Germans, and then from the Czechs too.